Hey guys, I wanted to do a presentation for you all today on the languages that I believe were spoken during the millennial reign. So let's go ahead and get started. So first I want to go back and look at the history of Israel's languages. And so the original language of the Israelites was Hebrew. The Old Testament was primarily written in Hebrew. However, portions of Daniel, Ezra, and Jeremiah were written in Aramaic. Aramaic was the primary language of the Babylonian Empire, where the people of Judah were held captive following the Babylonians' capture of Jerusalem in 597 BC. The portions of the Old Testament in Aramaic were written during and after this time. The Israelites were released under Cyrus the Great and were allowed to return to Jerusalem in 538 BC. So in the early stages of the Old Testament, we have Hebrew, and then we have Aramaic. Now we're going to move on to Greek. So the Greeks conquered Jerusalem in 332 BC under the leadership of Alexander the Great, where they remained in control until 160 BC. During this time, Greek became the primary language of the Jewish people. Because of this, the Old Testament was translated into Greek during the reign of Ptolemy II between 285 and 247 BC. This translation of the scriptures was called the Septuagint. And this was needed just because the Greeks were in control of Jerusalem for so long that many of the Jewish people actually started primarily speaking Greek around this time. And then we have the Maccabean Revolt, a Jewish rebellion against the Greeks' rule in Judea, took place from 167 to 160 BC. And this led to the recapturing of Jerusalem by the Jewish people, subsequently ending Greek control of the nation. So now we're moving forward to Latin, and the Romans conquered Jerusalem in 63 BC, where they ruled primarily through local kings, which is how things were in Jesus' day. Tension between Rome and the Jewish people reached its climax in 66 AD, culminating in the Jewish-Roman War that lasted until 70 AD with the destruction of the temple. According to secular history, the Roman Empire reached its peak in 117 AD, having conquered most of the known world at this time, until the empire's collapse in 476 AD. This resulted in the world being mainly Latinized under Roman rule. Now, to be clear, I do not agree with these dates. I do believe that the beast system known as Rome was conquered much earlier, but as the secular history still suggests, Rome had conquered much of the world. So now we're going to move on to languages in the millennial reign. So most Little Seasonists believe that Christ returned and established his millennial kingdom sometime between 70 and 76 AD. Afterwards, the Latin Vulgate, a Latin translation of the Bible, was introduced. Secular history tells us that the Latin Vulgate was commissioned by Pope Damascus I in 382 AD. Personally, I believe this was commissioned early in the millennial reign after Rome, aka the world, became Christianized under the kingship of Christ. So my personal belief is that the Latin Vulgate was the first Bible to be introduced after the start of the millennial reign. And we can see that the primary language of Latin going into the millennial reign was what it was because it's reflected in ancient architecture. So many Latin phrases and scriptural references are included in murals of Jesus and the glorified saints that adorn many Roman-style buildings. My belief is that after Christ established his kingdom and handed over the former beast kingdom to the saints, as described in Daniel 7:18, the leftover Romanesque buildings or basilica-style buildings were then adorned with these beautiful murals. And here is an example of one of these beautiful murals of the glorified Christ. and he's holding a book with Latin written in there. And then here's another example, kind of in a dome of one of these Roman style buildings. You can see Jesus, again, holding another book with Latin writing inside, and then also Latin going around the top of his head, kind of in an arched shape. And then here's another one, and this one is actually from Cappadocia, Turkey. And it's another dome artwork, and you can see again, this one's a little blurrier, but you can see the Latin inscriptions and writings throughout the mural. And then this is one of my favorites, and this is from St. Mark's Basilica, and it shows the basilica in the background of this mosaic, with lots of people in front wearing medieval style clothing, which I really like, but also find very interesting. But what we're looking for right here is the Latin written above the top. And then here is another inside of a dome in one of these basilicas, and it shows the creation story and Adam and Eve. And as you can see, there's Latin written throughout here as well. And one thing I've noticed is it doesn't really matter where you are in the world. There are Romanesque style architecture almost everywhere, and most of these do include the Latin inscriptions. And here is another example, and you can see all the glorified saints and angels as well. So the main difference actually is there is one portion of Greek that is in almost all of these, and that is the Christogram, or the letters around Christ's head is normally an IC and an XC, like in this picture here. And they are actually derived from the Greek name for Jesus. So translated into English, it means Jesus Christ. And it says down below, which I got from Google, that this abbreviation is common in Byzantine and Orthodox Christian iconography. Often found in religious mosaics, paintings, and icons, it emphasizes the divine nature of Christ. So there's that little touch of Greek in all of these mosaics and murals. Now let's move on to history of the Bible where it comes to languages. So secular history tells us in the first complete Bible in English was published in 535 by Miles Coverdale. Other early English Bibles include the Geneva Bible from 1560, the Bishop's Bible from 1568, and the King James Bible from 1611. However, I personally believe all these came about during the Millennial reign when the English language was introduced to the world. And I want to share that Jason Jack has a really good video on this, where he theorizes that the English language, once known as the Anglisk language, was introduced by angels and saints during the Millennial Kingdom. Of course, secular history tells us this was the Anglo-Saxons who introduced the English language to the world. But I believe, and he believes as well, that this was actually introduced during the Millennial reign. And I will link his video for this in the description. Now I kind of wanted to look at the dating system of AD and BC. So BC is obviously English and it's before Christ, but Anno Domini is Latin and it means in the year of the Lord. And I think it was JT, follows JC, who said in one of his videos, he said, why are these dating names two different languages? Which I put some time into it, and this is what I personally think. So I'll go ahead and read that. My belief is that Anno Domini was assigned to signify the time of Christ's rule at the onset of his kingdom, and is a Latin phrase due to it being the primary language of the world when his kingdom was first established. And then I believe BC was assigned as the time before Christ by Luciferians at the start of the little season when English was the primary language. And then I wanted to show just a couple of these coins, which I'm sure a lot of y'all had seen. And there's many other relics from the time of the millennial reign, and it'll either say an I in the year or a J in the year, as you can see in these two coins. And then I included a couple pictures from some artwork that I believe came about from that time. And I zoomed in really far, and you can see both of them have what would have gone above on the cross during the crucifixion. And one spells it Jesus with a J, and the other spells it IESUS. So it appears to me that these were both ways that Jesus spelled his name during the millennial reign, and that both were acceptable because you see the two different ways of spelling throughout, and the I and the J. And then now, during this little season, we have been introduced to the time of Anno Lucis, which is Latin meaning in the year of light. So this is a screenshot off of Google, and it says Anno Lucis, a Latin phrase that means in the year of light, is a dating system used by Freemasons in their ceremonial and commemorative proceedings. The abbreviation is AL. And you can see I included a couple pictures on the left side, which, yes, I did take from Jason Jack. And they both show the AL dating with the year. Now, Google also explained how it's used. It says Anno Lucis is the Gregorian year plus 4,000. For example, if the current year is 2023, then it's 6023 Anno Lucis. Now, they say it's based on the idea that the world was created 4,000 years before the birth of Christ. This is because the Bible says, "Let there be light," and there was light at the beginning of creation. However, we know the season that we're in, and we know that according to these secret societies, their light bearer is Lucifer, and there's other evidences of that. Here's one. So this was actually a spoon from the Chicago World Fair in 1933. Someone shared this in the Telegram group of Understanding Conspiracy, and the top of the spoon shows a depiction of Lucifer with a bald eagle on his head with the phrase "I will." And in Isaiah, there's a passage that talks about Lucifer, and it has 5 "I will" statements. So I've put those here. The first one is, "I will ascend into heaven." The second, "I will exalt my throne above the stars of God." The third, "I will also sit on the mount of the congregation and the sides of the north." The fourth, "I will ascend above the heights of the clouds." And the fifth, "I will be like the Most High." So it's not very subtle here. If you look around, you can see the time that we're in, and you can see who is in authority right now. Now, of course, I believe that Christ is always in authority, but we know the time that we're in, and that, Satan is being allowed this little season. And if you look around, it's extremely blatant, especially among the secret societies. So that's the conclusion of my presentation. I just wanted to discuss some of the languages of the millennial reign, as well as kind of get into the dating system there at the end. So as always, God bless.